Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 22 of Mrs. Bale's book list. Today I'll be reviewing 90 Miles to Havana by Enrique Flores-Galbis. I listened to the audiobook version of this historical fiction story and was excited to find it was narrated by the author himself. I particularly liked the audiobook experience for this book. The Cuban characters felt very authentic because of the author's proper pronunciation of their Latino names and Spanish language. Pronunciations like this can often trip me up when reading a book simply because it's not my native language, but listening to it read by a native speaker is a rich way to take in the story, and I really recommend it. Here's the premise. 90 Miles to Havana is a story of three brothers who flee from Cuba to Miami during the Cuban Revolution in the 1960s. At that time in history, there was a massive migration of 14,000 children unaccompanied by their parents under Operation Pedro Pan. The author, Enrique Flores-Galbis, writes from personal experience, having been one of those 14,000 children making the migration at that time. I think Flores-Galbis does a great job of making this story timeless, despite the fact that it's actually set in the 60s. It very much felt like it could be happening today, which I think makes it easier for kids to relate to. The story is told through the eyes of Julian, the youngest brother, who is about 11 years old. When a new dictator comes to power in Cuba, the boys are in danger of being sent to a work camp against their parents' will. Their mother's afraid they'll be indoctrinated with the agenda of the dictator, lose many of their freedoms, and likely have no control over if or when they'd ever be able to return to their parents. So their mother organizes the necessary papers to get them on a plane to Miami, where they will live in a children's refugee shelter until their parents can legally join them in the U.S. They hope to start a new life under the freedoms the U.S. has to offer. So as the reader, we get a fascinating view into the child refugee experience in Miami. Although Julian and his brothers were well off in Cuba, they were allowed to bring virtually nothing with them to America, per the Cuban government, who forced them to surrender anything of value. They're immediately faced with the bully-dominated realities of an overcrowded refugee shelter. Their conditions are nothing like the comfy beds and delicious food they're accustomed to. They sleep on mats on the bathroom floor and are assigned to work long hours in the kitchen. During their time in the refugee shelter, they do their best to avoid confrontation with Caballo, the leader of the bully pack, which is difficult with Julian's older brother's hot-headed tendencies and short fuse. The brothers try to avoid being separated, as kids are moved out of the shelter and into various orphanages or foster families around the country. Julian, as the youngest brother, is used to his parents and brothers making decisions for him and being told what to do, and also that his opinion never seems to matter. So when he's finally separated from the rest of his family, Julian is faced with some serious decision-making of his own as he aspires to reunite his family. After one final run-in with Caballo the bully, Julian decides he has to leave the shelter and survive on the streets of Miami on his own, because he will be able to make money that way and not surrender it to the bully. Out in Miami, Julian connects with Tomas, a young man who's fixing up a boat with a secret mission to journey the 90 miles to Cuba and transport 14 desperate refugees to Miami without being detected by the Cuban government. Julian proves his usefulness with fixing small engines, and soon faces the choice of whether to embark on this dangerous journey with Tomas, who likely can't succeed without him, even though Julian has word that his mother has finally arrived to collect him in America. I won't tell you what happens after that. This goes on my list of personal favorites for several reasons. The thing that I find particularly enriching about this story is that it comes from Enrique Flores-Galbis' true life experiences as a child refugee in America. Imagining him as his childhood self, I envision him enduring hardship, finding his voice, and eventually telling his story through this book. That's exactly the kind of power we try to teach our children in writing classes today, or at least we should be. When a child is empowered in their ability to tell their own story, they can inspire and educate so many others. Stories are important, and having the ability and confidence to tell them is so, so powerful. Another reason I love this book is because the themes or messages are so strong and positive. The first is the idea that being the youngest can naturally make others underestimate you. And in Julian's case, his family even actively makes him feel inferior and inept with body language and words that show clear disapproval of his performance or ideas. The story helps us to see the potential in a young mind and how that potential can be unleashed when given wisdom and encouragement instead of doubt and ridicule. I literally got goosebumps as I got to the point where you see Julian change and grow in confidence at a major turning point in the story. The story also has major anti-bullying themes. While this is great on its own, the way this book does it is especially incredible because the author draws very clear parallels between the bullying that exists in Julian's personal life to bullying happening at the government level. The reader will have the opportunity to ponder how dictatorships differ from democracies, as Julian and the secondary characters try different tactics to overthrow the bully in their refugee shelter. Julian seeks wise counsel from grown-ups who help him understand the difference between the two. The book also gives positive messages about the importance of hard work to succeed. Several grown-up characters set an example of working hard for a purpose or to support their families, even if they've already gained financial success in Cuba and had to start all over again in America, like a Cuban doctor who's washing dishes at a restaurant in Miami because his Cuban medical license is no good in America. Children work hard for money to help their families join them in America. Tomas works hard to get his boat running in time to rescue the refugees, which include his own family. The work ethic and life perspective we see through the eyes of refugees in the story is incredible. I think these messages are vital for our kids today to fight the entitlement mindset that tends to happen as a result of relatively easy lives. There are so many more positive themes throughout this book. I think it would be very appropriate for any middle school reader, but may particularly be a good one to hand a boy, simply because of the relatability of the main character. In terms of appropriateness factors, this book is nice and clean. Alcohol and drug use, none. Sexual content, Julian's two older brothers are described several times as acting completely differently whenever their female neighborhood friend comes near. The girl is pretty annoyed by this. This is an obvious reference to the awkwardness of male-female adolescent attraction, but it remains a simple observation by Julian, and nothing romantic, inappropriate, or otherwise ever happens. Violence. There is gunfire mentioned during the Cuban Revolution, but no bloodshed. During this time, people also throw things from rooftops and are generally out of control, which confuses Julian, but nothing graphic is mentioned. An adult does eventually explain to Julian why all this is happening. There's a fair amount of bully-related pushing and shoving, stepping on fingers, that sort of thing. Language. None. Like I said, this has been one of my favorite middle school books so far. It's so rich and positive, with inspirational messages for kids today. It has educational value, is interesting for kids, and it's very relatable. Enjoy! Happy reading! Thank you so much for listening today. As always, you can find show notes and the web version of Mrs. Bale's book list at KristenEmilyBale.com. That's Kristen with an E and Bale with a B-E-H-L. May God bless your day.